They used to say the Bayou Teche ran black at night, a strip of polished obsidian winding through cane and cypress, and that if you stood quiet on its banks you could hear the river remember. It remembered the hollow clunk of skiffs against pilings, the wet thud of cane being heaved into boats, the long groans of the mill wheels in grinding season, and sometimes when the air was so still the gnats seemed to hang from it like beads. The river remembered the voice of a girl whose true name no book ever wrote down. In 1853, St. Landry Parish spread out like a quilt stitched with cruel fingers, squares of wealth pieced together by hands that did not own themselves. Bel Hombre sat among them, 3 stories of white mouth and perfect teeth, a house built to smile while it swallowed whole the lives around it. It belonged to Patience Devo, a planter who counted his virtues as carefully as his barrels of sugar. He wore the same dark suits when the sun crawled like fire across the fields, as when he bowed his head in the front pew at St. Landry, and he preferred conversation that wrapped itself in scripture and Latin tags, because those were languages no one could answer in. He'd inherited the place young and perfected it older, a man famous for exacting standards, which is how neighbors said cruelty when they still hoped for dinner invitations. He measured everything that could be counted, rain inches, yields, lashes, and then, when arithmetic failed to satisfy, he set about measuring what should never be. He called it experiment the way a butcher calls a room, the shop the blood. Rinsed off the stones each evening as if the stone could forget, the girl arrived in March. Her bill of sale called her Clara, though that word pulled stranger in her mouth than the bit a traitor once forced between her teeth. She had been born far from Cain, a place where winters had a sound, branches cracking under frost, and where her mother had wrapped a scrap of blue cloth around her wrist to keep her safe. At 7, she learned how much magic a blue scrap had in court. None. Sold, then resold, then carried south like a seed that cannot choose the soil, until the Bayou Teche swallowed her reflection and gave her back to the steps of Bel Hombre. Devo paid $800 for her and went home, feeling that particular satisfaction men feel when they have obtained a tool they were certain the day required. He saw what others did not or would not, the iron lace in her silence, the way her eyes skimmed printed words despite the law forbidding such skimming, the absence of any tie that could tighten if she were pulled. He wanted a vessel without family to spill from it, a pupil without a history that might talk. The rhythms of the house caught her and shook her like a sieve. Fire at dawn. The black kettle shouldered above the flame, bread rolled and slapped and patted to the oven's mouth, cane-sweet steam wandering through the open hallways, the brass banister warm by noon. Aunt Rachel, who had seen 30 years pass through that kitchen, worked beside her and spoke in the particular way people speak when truth costs skin. "Keep small," she said once, not looking up from the pot she scraped. "Don't let him notice the shape of you." But noticing was precisely what the man did. One humid night he asked if she could read. It was not a question, not in the legal sense. It was a fitted key slipped toward a lock to see if there was tumbling inside. She answered with a little truth, the kind that sits down so a larger lie can pass. And he smiled as if a sermon had turned out to agree with him. After that, her duties altered. She was a broom in the morning and a pen at night. He sat her in his study beneath spines of books he loved to touch, and he dictated, not letters at first, but commandments, verse upon verse about obedience, the bolt sliding into obligation and staying there. He corrected her hand as he corrected everything, the flesh by small degrees, the spirit by many. He liked methods more than he liked people. The ledger of his days had columns for behavior and pain. He punished in ways that did not show on Sunday. Pressure where skin could hide it, hunger measured like medicine, wakefulness folded into the night until hours tore and the rags of them hung from her. He put a stone of silence in her mouth and expected her to swallow. She did, because the cost of spitting was a whip and a sail south. In the fields, cane sharpened itself against the wind and men sang a rhythm the wind could not blunt. In the quarters, laughter lived in small, fierce pockets, tucked away and pulled out when the dark came early, and work let go its grip for a moment. In the big house, Clara learned what could be learned from being hurt, where nerves braided beneath the skin, where breath snagged, how pain climbed a ladder and where it lost its footing. Sometimes he left the journal open, a prompt he trusted she would not read. She read. He called those before her subjects and numbered them as if he were counting crows. 7, 9, 12. She counted backwards by grief and knew she was 13. By summer, a kiln heat lay over St. Landry, firing every living thing until it rang when tapped. The mill creaked in its sleep like an old animal dreaming of work. Devo kept his rituals. Bourbon on Wednesdays, prayers on Sundays, experiments most nights. Rumor lay over Bel Hombre like a second roof. Housegirls who ceased to be housegirls. Young men whose shoulders settled into a flinch they could not put down. A drowning ruled a choice because the dead cannot argue. The neighbors saw what they wished to see and praised his roses. She changed, as all metals do when pulled long enough. Something drew tight inside her and would not break. Hope, which is a hot thing, burned itself out. Calculation, which is cold, remained. She watched him. He kept the key to his private rooms on a chain and removed it only when sleep claimed him. He drank on Wednesdays like a man convinced liquor ran the accounts more kindly than ink. He kept a letter opener on the desk, a polite blade meant for paper that had never been called by its older names. She measured the study by steps and counted the creaks in the floor as if they were dogs that needed calming. October rose crisp from the marsh. The cane stood tall and ready to fall, and the mill was tuned the way a violin is tuned, string by string, until nothing is left but tone and cost. Clara overheard the date of her disposal. We call it a sale, because English is a language that makes distant the things it ought to hold close, and the geography of it. The sugar parishes south of New Orleans, the places where men became figures and figures became graves. She did not weigh escape. She had seen too many run and be run down, had seen the palm print of patrols on faces, the blue of it blooming. She did not weigh law. Law was a net cast from the porch of the big house, and the names on it were the names of men who ate there. She weighed the river. She weighed the key. She weighed the bottle and the blade. Wednesday came pace perfect, as most traps do. She set breakfast with steady hands and could not taste her own noon cornbread, because hunger and fear sometimes wear the same mask. In the afternoon, she cleaned the study while Devo, with his overseer, walked the mill and pointed at things so other men could fix them. She wrapped the letter opener in a cloth and tucked it where skirts hid it. The steel lay cool against her thigh all evening while she served him meat and drink and took away what remained. She waited in the hall and felt every beat of her heart as if each were a step toward the door. "Clara," he called. "Attend me." The study smelled of oil and animal glue, leather and smoke, the amber sweetness of distilled fire. He had poured himself past caution. He spoke as if they were two scholars conferring, as if her body were not already a footnote in a book he intended to publish to no one. He spoke of experiments ending, of fresh subjects, of how hatred clouds and obedience clarifies, and when he lifted his glass she saw the throat the way you see shore through fog. She did not aim for poetry. She aimed for artery and found bone, and the blade shuddered and her hand with it. He rose with a noise she had never heard from him, something that did not belong in a room with curtains. The chair fell. Book spilled. His fingers found her throat like a memory returning fast. The room narrowed to the circle between his hands. She was a bell being rung, and the sound of her own blood in her ears said almost kindly that dying is a road and you're already on it. Her hand closed on the handle she had left in him. Blood made the grip a fish, but she had held eels in tide shallows as a child and knew how to keep what wants to be lost. She pulled, and the sound was the opposite of a prayer. Then she worked the blade the way someone works a field before frost, quick and low and without speech. She struck until his voice broke into animal pieces and then into nothing, until his hands remembered how to be hands and fell away. He was not dead. Mercy is fast. She was something else. Afterward is a long country. She moved through it on foot. The candlestick was wait and answer, the poker-levered joints that men preferred to imagine eternal. She knew how to keep him alive and hurt, because he had taught her every road into that country and which ones doubled back toward breath. She gagged him with linen and kept the lamps fed. The night took on the thin blue edge of a blade about to show morning, and still she counted. She could give reasons for the number later if pressed, for the enslaved whose names she knew, for the days between her purchase and this dawn, for the people he had numbered, for the margins of ledgers where meat became money. But in the moment the count was not symbol so much as ballast. She counted so the floor would hold. When the light changed from tallow to ash and then to gray, she looked at the work and saw no triumph in it. Relief is a door that does not always open. She put the blade down because there was nowhere else to put it. She stepped into the hall, and the house made its soft morning noises as if it had not watched a man become parts. Her feet took her to the front steps. Gravel took her prints like a clerk copying a name. At the road she stopped and rested her hands at her sides as if she had come a very long way, and meant to stand a moment before going farther. She did not hide. She did not beg the trees to cover her. The patrol found her where she had decided to be found. She gave them the truth without adornment. "I killed Patience Devo," she said. "He needed killing." The deputies, who had learned to keep faces as still as pond water, could not help themselves. One flinched. They led her back like a procession that had lost its band. What the men who opened the study saw became the parish's most carefully kept silence. The coroner stood outside afterward, bark gone from the tree of his voice, and said nothing useful. The sheriff smoked the way a man bails a sinking boat. The judge, when called, ordered the journal sealed with a speed that suggested he knew a thing can eat through paper, and then eat through men, and that some hungers should be locked away with 2 keys and many oaths. The trial happened as if it had not. A room closed to air, a lawyer with nothing to say, a verdict that never learned how to stand. Meanwhile, the woods filled with people who refused to work and refused to be driven home by anything except justice. They built small fires and cooked what they had and watched the road. They did not chant. They did not threaten. They existed together with an intention large enough to scare every porch in St. Landry. The parish chose a solution no book would call solution. An announcement said the law was satisfied and the matter resolved, and then the matter vanished the way a coin vanishes into the fist of a man who tells you to watch closely. Nothing official lists what became of the girl. There is no receipt with her name on it in any place where paper keeps history. The stories seed and reseed themselves in mouths that know how to keep a tale alive. Some say there's a grave without a marker behind the old mill site, and that iron never rusts right there. Some say she was carried at night in a wagon full of fodder, and lifted through 3 back doors between Opelousas and the river, and found a skiff that only rode north. Some say a judge's hand shook on a pen that signed a paper that did not look like mercy, but purchased it just the same. It is also possible, in a nation that has always loved forgetting, that men put her in a cart and did what men do when they are frightened and want to tell themselves they are. Brave Bel Hombre stood one more season and then came down under. The same sun that once made its columns shine. The sale notices were tidy. The vines were not. They returned exactly as if they had been invited. The burial pits turned up during the clearing, 71 of them in crooked rows like letters in a code, were explained by officials in the way officials explain everything that scares them. Disease, a sudden fever, a week of calamity that happened upon one square of earth and not its neighbors. The church records do not list such a fever. The papers do not mention it. The holes were shallow and had no names inside them. Men with shovels paid to do what they were told stopped their ears and filled the earth. Years slid and the war came and men learned a new way to count bodies. Freedom was declared the way a bell is struck from far away and heard in waves. The parish altered its skin but kept its bones. The journal slept behind doors too thick for the curious. Children learned to hush when certain elders said certain names. Rachel lived long enough to tell the story and then longer, so she could tell it twice. She never said the girl's given name because she had never been allowed to know it. The name Clara stayed nailed to the tale because sometimes the only tool you have is the wrong one. The Bayou Teche remembers better than people do. On nights when the air sits heavy and the frogs sing like someone's tightening the strings, the river makes a sound like pages turning. It is easy to imagine a desk and a decanter and a letter opener whose point had always wanted to be honest. It is easier still to imagine a girl standing in a road with blood stiff on her dress and an expression on her face like the surface of a lake right before the wind touches it. If you want the comfort of endings, the parish does not have that for you. It has the math of a man who believed pain could be counted, and the countermath of a woman who insisted that what he measured would break the measuring stick. It has 71, which is a number that means exactly what you need it to mean and no more. It has a house that thought it could keep a secret and a road that saw a woman refuse to run. It has a judge who labeled horror inadmissible, and a choir that sang the week after as if sound could mop up blood. It has fields where men bent their backs and straightened them later, and discovered both actions were kinds of prayer. Time tried to sand down the edges. It always does. In subdivisions that grew out of the old plots, new porches look over trimmed grass that doesn't know how to remember. Dogs chase light thrown off windshields. Children pedal bicycles. And there is a spot on the turn where the pavement always looks damp even when the sky has been brass for a month. The grown-ups call it a drainage quirk. Some of them say bel hombre like a sound they once heard, the way you might say a name you dreamed and then forgot the face that carried it. Sometimes the remembering chooses you. A man fishing the bend will look up because the water went quiet all at once, as if the river had stepped on its own hem. A woman setting her groceries in the car will pause because the air smells for 3 breaths like hot sugar and lamp oil. A field hand's descendant will stop mid-sentence when she visits the parish and touches the iron fence of St. Landry Church, and feels, through the metal, a shiver like music that has chosen a different key. It is tempting to make the girl a symbol. People who do not have to live under symbols like to build them. She was not a sermon. She was a person who did a thing that needed doing and paid. She acted when every instrument of the age tuned itself toward keeping her a noun and not a verb. If you ask whether she was justified, the Bayou Teche does not answer. Rivers do not vote. They carry. They witness. They pull away the silt and show you stones, and what you make of the shape is your own to live with. On certain nights when the cane is tall and of one mind and a little wind runs its hand through the field, you can hear it as a kind of whisper, a soft abrasion, leaf on leaf, that says in its own language that nothing becomes sugar without first being cut, and if you stand by the water and listen hard, there is a second sound beneath the first. It is not quite a girl's voice, and it is not quite a knife, but you will know both when you hear them. They belong to one story, and the story will not be buried however deep the parish tries. It rises the way sap rises, the way river fog rises, the way names, true names, rise when someone says, finally, "You will not erase me."